Dale, if you would just start with your name and your address and your
All
phone number
right.
for us.
Dale Redburn, and I live at 1610 Wellington in Lansing. The phone number is 482-3185.
What's your zip code over there?
48910.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Now, when did you start at the plant and where did
April 10th, 1947. And I hired in hourly.
okay, doing what?
Well, I was in sheet metal only because, let me tell you a little bit about it. Just before that, there was a strike.
All right.
So I made 51 cents an hour, and I was really proud. You know. Thought that, hey, if someday I can get up to $3,000 a year, we'll have it made. You know, sure.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's perspective for you.
But
Well, what were you doing down in the plant?
oh, the reason I got into sheet metal was because Dick Monroe was the night shift superintendent, and also my brother-in-law at that time. Okay. So we came, and I remember that, and I remember getting hired in, and I remember the guy telling me, well, you'll never make it because you don't weigh enough, and we're going to have to put you on wet sanding. And I said, no, I don't like wet sanding. So anyway, Dick Monroe knew I was going in there, so he said, well, heck, we got some jobs in sheet metal. So I went in there and worked in small presses. And okay, who did I was trying to think who I was working for.
Your foreman?
Yeah.
Okay.
But Jack Domagowski was a foreman. And then Jack went over and worked on crankshafts, and I know I used to go over on after work, you know, the overtime to work on the crankshafts with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I ran the rattler, which was
a what?
well, that's takes the grease off of washers and so on, you know, and with sawdust. That was a lot of fun.
Okay.
But it also took me off the job, so I didn't have the efficiency to meet. A lot of them did, you know.
Yeah.
And as I said, I was in the small parts place, so there were a lot of women, spot welders and that type of thing. Then I got into welding.
In the same area?
Yeah. And but all this was on hourly about 5 years. So then I went to our heliarc welding, it was called, which is helium around an welder.
Yeah.
And we welded those corners on the front fenders.
Okay, right up in the very front?
Yeah.
Is that where you folded it around and put it together? Is that what it was?
That's right.
Okay.
And also, you know, well, there was one down the side of the front and then that little tiny one in the front that you're talking about.
Okay. So
Yeah. There were actually two places to weld. And there were two of us, and one of us run the buck, and there was an inspector on the floor. I remember that. He used to take the fenders off and make sure they were heliarced right, you know.
So you welded every fender?
Well, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 of us, yeah.
That did all the fenders?
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, we were so busy those years we had to work Sunday. So what we would do is get far enough ahead so we didn't have anything to do on Sundays. Sure. We were right across from the fender line.
I must have been down building in the middle of the plant back in there?
Yeah. 56, was it? Yeah, 56. And then we were on a platform just across from it, just outside the door. And then when you went through the door, you went over to 20 something, you know, where the finish was. Yeah. 27B. Yeah. I worked nights most of the time. And a lot of the guys that I work with were going to Michigan State.
Oh, well, that was a good arrangement then.
Yeah.
People could work and go to school.
And that's what I did later on. You know, I think from that experience. But let's see, I was 5 years on hourly and then 5 years on salary, and I went on as foreman in sheet metal, so you know I didn't leave very far.
Did you?
But well, the way it came to pass was Jess Wise, asked me well, do you know any math? And I said, yes. And he said, good, we can get you on inspection, but you're going to have to take a cut because, you know, welders made more money. So I took the cut and I went out on the floor in 56, the old, we called them piss pots, you know.
The Taurus cover?
Taurus, yeah, part of the transmission thing, yeah. And where they welded the necks on. And we inspected those at the back end of it, yeah.
Okay.
And then Jess came around and he said, well, Dale, do you know any math? And I said, yes, I do. So from what I knew, he was going to make me a floor inspector out in 34, was it?
Yeah, that's the...
Yeah, that small presses section. And instead of that, I went in the gauge crib room and the layout because I knew enough math. And Jess Young was in there, and so was Loyal Hulk. They all both helped me. They were both on our leave. And so I was in there. And then from that is when I went on supervision, yeah.
In inspection then?
Yes.
Okay.
Stayed right on inspection the whole time.
All right.
Always in the good.
Well, where was the gauge crib at that time?
Oh, the back end of 34, right across from the tool room. So they could come out the back door of the tool room. See, we used to run all the gambling games for the die room and the tool room and everything. You know, the papers with 100 squares on for the football games and all that jazz. I thought you'd know it. And 40, you guys, the big shots were right up there. Yeah. And that's where inspection's main office was, over on the other side, across from, right straight across
on the
from,
east side of the
yeah.
And,
And,
did you ever see any of those people from
no, I saw I heard Bob, Elmer Cole was all. And he was general superintendent or superintendent at the time? Because I talked to him about going to school. And he said, yeah. He said, in fact, I can fix it up so you can go to GMI. And I said, no, I'd rather go to state and work nights. And let's see now, that's when I went on salary. But anyway, when I went on salary, I went either in sheet metal, yeah. And then I went across to the jet plant.
Okay, so that were we making jet engines at that time?
Yeah.
So that would have been like 53 maybe.
That's where Jim just hired in from Texas. Logan.
Yeah.
Just hired in from Texas. And he was trying to make some shrouds. We were up in the axle plant then, up in, you know.
Oh, the Plant 1 axle plant?
Yeah, before we moved across, because that new plant wasn't done over here.
So you were kind of a pilot line thing.
Yeah, yeah. So then we went over to Plant 3.
So Dale, the shroud making part for pilot was up in the axle plant?
Yeah, well, everything was.
Oh, did they do assembly work up there too?
Yeah, because, yeah, we must have.
Or was that?
Or else we never got that far. We made some small parts. Now I'm trying to think what the heck we did. Went across, I know when we went over to Plant 3, then Armitage was my boss. Because when I was over there, it was Stu Clark. And then it was Armitage was the big boss. And Armitage come up to me one day when we went to Plant 3. We finally got over there, but they weren't done with the plant yet.
So you just kind of moved it.
Yeah, in fact, one day, right over the place where we worked, the small part, way down what would be south end? No?
North end of the building?
North end, yeah. Over by the parking lot, yeah. And the guy was up there doing something with a framework, painting it or riveting it or something. Yeah, and he worked for a contractor, and of course he was one of these jockeys that instead of working the way he was supposed to, was on a platform and it tipped over and he came down. Yeah.
Killed.
No. He wrote it down, but he hurt his leg real bad. Yeah. But we had a bunch of women over there, and then Armitage, as I was going to say, came to me and said, "Hey, how would you like to go to Chicago, to Willow Run, where Buick actually assembled a complete jet engine, and sell them the stuff that, you know." So I said, all right. So every week I'd go fly down to Willow Run, and I would tell them about the shrouds and the blade. In fact, the turbine blade, they didn't like it because we were supposed to cut it off for them square.
Yeah.
And we cut it off and left a thing on the end, you know, a little tail on it. Yeah. So they wanted those removed. So I took some hourly people down there. Bill Flynn, somebody, I don't know. But they were production people. That's why I didn't know.
Yeah.
And we went down there. We must have stayed there a week or so, getting this, you know, because it was cheaper than sending them back to Lansing.
What are you doing, hand grinding them off?
Yeah, they just gave us a little grinder. We went zip, 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 you know, and knocked them right off. Yeah. Well, they were separate blades then.
Okay.
And so they were putting them into canisters, the complete jet engine. They took me around, showed me that, you know, so that if they fell off a ship, they could float in the water type of thing. But they were building 3 for every jet plane that took a engine.
1 for the engine plus 2 spares?
2 spares. And then found out they didn't need 2 spares. They only needed 1 spare. So right away their contract was cut. Wright Patterson had the original contract out east.
Yeah.
And boy, they couldn't believe that we could build them that fast in the first place.
Yeah.
And then when we did, why they couldn't, they kept their own, you know, level of production up all the time. We were the ones that suffered from it.
Because we did too good a job?
Yeah. Oh, we had the Magnaflux and we had acid and stuff that we had to stamp the things in order to, you know, show that they were through it.
Yeah.
Let's see, Bob Cook was the manufacturing manager or something. No, he was something over there. But anyway, I remember working with him and then kneeling down over those holes in the ground where we used to put the engine, you know, down in. Yeah. And then measure it with those great big mics, 36-inch mics, you know. You get whatever you wanted to. And he would come down and he'd say, hey, they look pretty good, don't they? You know, they did. And that's where I met Bob Scott.
Because he was running had a piece of the action there, didn't he?
Yeah. In fact, that's where he got his company car. And the first day he got it, he said, hey, you want to go for a ride? And hell, I rode around his car. I remember that to this day. Okay, then I went back to sheet metal.
That just stayed going for a couple of years over there?
Yeah, whatever it was. They were still over there working on it, but I thought, well, it's time to get out of there. So I went back over sheet metal as a foreman. But
what area did you have? You had the assembly end of the business?
No. Oh, small parts all the time. Inspection of small parts. Yeah, and who the heck was the production? Oh, I can't think of the production foreman's name.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, as well as that. But anyway, a small parts. Yeah, and it was funny because I went back into small parts, but we didn't work the overtime. I thought the rest of them were getting lots of overtime. So I told Don Jennings, remember old Don? Sure. And I said, hey, I'll switch jobs with you. So I took over the steel deal and he took over small parts, you know, on the floor.
You just kind of switch it?
Well, I don't know. It was all right with Doc Thorburn, who was our boss. And so I went in the office and I took that over. Well, Don had some trouble with Otis Stanley because they were arguing over whether steel was good or bad. And when Don went on vacation, Stanley pulled all the red tags off the stuff, or I don't know, vice versa or something. But anyway, they had something fall out. So they were agreeable that I would be the steel guy.
Okay.
So I used to go to lunch with all the guys, but get all kinds of overtime. No. It was in there that I wasn't getting the overtime. And then I went back on the floor. Yeah, okay.
All right.
Because then I had to go down and take the oil pans and all that kind of stuff. You know, the old oil pan tester, the water tester and stuff. And so I took that. They used to criticize me because I would never wear a tie. I remember that.
Really? But everybody did. That was kind of.
Oh, yeah. That's how you recognize supervision.
Yeah.
But I was going to school, and this was all on nights. So I could go in that same gauge crib that I used to work on hourly. I used to go in there. That was where the foreman sat.
Oh, okay.
But I could have school books and everything in there. And when these guys come in from the steel mills, of course, I knew all of them.
Yeah.
And most of them had been through school, so they were helping me with homework. So anyway, let's see. Then I'm 5 years on hourly. Then I went on foreman for 5 years. Oh, then I left there and went to the engine parts plant.
Yeah.
One time they borrowed me before they built the rocket. And they said, hey, the last sixes are coming off and they got to be torn down and rebuilt. So I was just loaned over there to the engine plant itself. Harold Houghton was a big cheese superintendent. So then I learned about tearing them down and putting them back together and so on. So then as a general foreman, I went to the engine parts plant on inspection. Worked for Harold Wright opposite Mike Aldwood. Okay. And then one year we were going to have a baby born, and turns out to be Tammy. And Mike said, well, forget your vacation then, I'll take my vacation early. And he did. And it went on and on and on. In fact, Tammy was finally born December 22nd. Oh. Yeah, so let's see, we had changed, and Hettinger worked for me on the block floor. And then we came along to a big cut. And I had to go back on to the foreman, from general foreman. But they felt kind of sorry for me, so they didn't cut my pay. So I went back as foreman at the same pay. And I'll be a son of a gun if 3 or 4 months later things loosened up, so they give me a 10% raise and put me back on general foreman. So it turned out real well, Yeah. And let's see, Mike was general foreman too. So I worked out a deal with Mike, and I said, hey, Mike, how would you like to work days all the time? And I can work nights and go to school. That's what took me 11 years to get through Michigan State was, trying to figure out the things. Yeah, the onlooker picked it up and all that jazz. But, okay, so then I was over there as a general foreman. Then I left there and went over to the forge plant.
About when?
Well, they're all 5-year periods.
Oh, you spent sort of
so 47, I was 5 years on hourly.
Okay, that's 52.
And then 5 years on foreman.
That's 57.
So it must have been 58,
58 would have been the crunch year.
57, okay. Then it would be 59 or 50, the last of 58 or the first of 59 that I went over to the forge plant. Yeah. Okay. Because Elmer Corbin was still in charge of it, and Bill Mouse was the manufacturing guy, engineering guy, and who's layout?
Well, let's see that way. Let's see. George was over.
Fowler?
Well, George Redburn was.
No. Yeah, but he had left. Yeah. I think Fowler took his place.
Al Porter.
Porter? Yes. Al Porter took his place, yeah. So then I was downstairs, and in fact, I had the whole plant. And Miller was in the forging end of it. And I ran into people that I knew, you know, from the moves outside and so on. Like Leo Slusser was in the forge plant, still on inspection. So I was assistant superintendent. Yeah, that's where I got my company car. Oh, I was so excited. Yeah.
Now, was the forge plant at that point in time somewhat autonomous, or was it part of the organization?
No, it was just made part of the organization. I
Okay.
think we had something to do with it because before that they ran their own inspection department.
Oh, all right.
And so they give us a kind of an office over there by the lab.
Yeah, way out in the plant.
Yeah. And that's where my office was.
Okay.
Bob Smith was with me. I remember that. Yeah.
Was that any kind of a problem, the fact that they were just trying to switch over, so to speak, from an organizational standpoint? Did it work out?
Yeah, but I don't think we knew it over there.
Oh.
Because Elmer, we were very careful. I worked for Ed Gerke, by the way. He was our superintendent, and then Armitage was his boss, you know, that type of thing. But Elmer had told me, he said, now, if we have any problems, let's keep it in-house. Not, you know, spread it out all over the place. So that's what we were doing. And we had a couple of such problems. I'd tell Ed, but Ed was pretty good about it, you know, and so we'd kind of keep it in-house and take care of it ourselves through the lab and so on.
Rather than run it up the flagpole and down.
Yeah, so, and then get all kinds of help from the main plant that we didn't need. People like yourself would come over, you know. Terrible. Okay, let's see, Miller played the organ.
Bud Miller?
Yeah, I went out to his house. And his great big feet, he had to take his shoes off to play the organ because, you know, they've only got those pedals, yeah. And, he was pretty good, yeah. This is out in Okemos. That. And he and I used to go places. Why? Oh, we went down to Detroit for something, and anyway, he was showing me where the trotters ran.
Oh, okay.
And he was evidently interested in trotters, or somebody in the family was. So where they, you know, on the way down Detroit, they had a field there that they ran. Okay, that gets me through the plant 3.
Just a minute, Dale. The time you were at the forge plant, they were still making all forging, correct? That was an all forge plant.
Wow. And our biggest thing was the crankshafts up in front. Now they just switched over and trying to start a crankshaft that was stamped rather than hammered. Yeah. Remember that? Yeah, right.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, it was because for production it was, but it wasn't for us because all we do is check them. Yeah, yes. In fact, they took me out. I ran that. I forget who the boss was, but he took me out and showed me inside the furnace and how they measured how hot it is in there. You know? And then over against the wall, they cut off something.
Shear.
Yeah,
Shear.
yeah. And we used to make that whip drive shaft for Pontiac.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to go down there and keep selling that. And Pontiac was terrible about suppliers. You know? And we had to keep reminding him that, hey, we use the same money that you do, you know. So when we fill out we can't take you to lunch or anything. But they wanted somebody to take them to lunch and do this. Oh. But anyway, we finally got
That was kind of a problem part, that whip shaft.
it wasn't, except they were so chicken about it because, you know, if they were a little bit long or a little bit short or whatever, you know. Then I used to go down to Hydromatic because they bought some parts from us too. And oh, Elmer, I got to tell you about Elmer Corbin.
Okay.
He had a company car, of course. And then one time, what we did is call on our own customers.
Okay.
So one time we said, let's go down, we'll pick up Indiana, and then we'll go over to Wisconsin and pick up, American Motors bought it,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
But the way he would get away with it in the car is he had the tool room build him a thing that fit over the seat, and we could play cards in the back seat, play gin, you know. Yeah.
So somebody drove,
Oh, yeah.
play cards.
Yeah, we had four of us would go. Bill Mouse always went with us.
Okay.
And, yeah, if I wasn't playing, I could sit up in the jump seat, not the driver's seat, but the other seat and kind of look back, yeah. I forget who the hell drove. Somebody wanted to drive because they didn't play cards. Yeah.
Was cards big at the Forge plant?
Yes. And so were lunch hours. Awful big. But, in fact, that was, Bob Smith was over there, and that was his downfall because he used to go home, and my wife would see him, and because we lived out there then, by him. She'd say, "How come he's out here?" I don't know, you know. But then, right after lunch, we would have a meeting at the forage plant, and we'd talk about everything, and they'd let us sit in and listen to the whole thing, you know. And if we had anything to contribute, why we did, but it was mostly production problems. Okay, so then I left the forge. Oh, I know what they did. They started reliability then.
Oh.
So then they came over and they said, hey, how would you like to be the head of these engineers that we're going to hire?
Okay.
Reliability engineers. And I said, great. So I went over to 64 and I sat in the corner office. That's Wendell's old, or where Wendell Olds was. And that was my office. Ralph Smith worked for me. I remember that because he wasn't very happy about me coming up there. I think he kind of thought, well, he might get that job.
I see.
Hell, he never even, as far as I was concerned, wasn't even from a college because he was from Tri-State or some damn thing.
Yeah.
And John Ibsen was there. John was always pretty good, but John is so interested in outside stuff. You know, he's got apartments and places down in Florida that he rents out. So then I used to interview quite a few people.
New job.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what the hell that one guy's name. Anyway, we hired him for the tire machine, and then the tire machine went out, you remember, and he got to be an engineer, which was wrong because that's not what he was qualified for at all, as far as I was concerned. Yeah. But I felt kind of bad until I saw some of the gauge engines. They were pretty sick bunch. But
what caused the reliability department to come to pass? What made that? Why it was made?
other divisions were doing it, and we had a chief inspector. What the heck was his name that Elmer worked for? And then he left. Oh, and Bob Cook took over as chief engineer. Our chief inspector, I mean. And then when we went into reliability, which we said encompasses more than, in fact, Truxell and so on went over to engineering in order to start something like that. But it never worked out through engineering. And so then they brought over a guy from purchasing, Tom Dart. And boy, he was great. And he took hold and he kind of formed the whole thing. And the rest of the companies within General Motors had such a thing because there was a board of directors of reliability that met, you know, down the proving ground. So.
Why do you think it was formed at that juncture?
I don't know. I was just trying to think why they.
Must have been something that precipitated the need or something. It
was kind of a new fad type of thing, you know. engineers, the gauge group came, well, Sherm Lawson used to be the head of the gauges
Okay.
before Glenn Lowell's was.
Now, it encompassed more than just inspection then, didn't it?
Yeah. In other words, there was a chief inspector, and that was Elmer's job. Director of reliability.
Okay, there was a chief inspector and a
Director of reliability, who at that time, let's see, the first one we had was Tom Darden, then Tom Tompkins, progressed.
Yeah.
And then Dick came, Trick Eyes.
Elmer Cole is chief inspector.
Yeah.
Rest
Well, then Armitage had the quality engineers and so on. And then I had the quality engineers directly. I worked for
Charlie?
Charlie, yeah. Charlie had everything else outside of the inspector floor and the plant. Then this went on for a while, and then one day Tompkins called me and they said, all right, now here's what we're going to do. We had Elmer Cole and Armitage in there, and he said, now what we're going to do is split this into 3 instead of 2 like we've had it. So Elmer will have all the inspections. Charlie had he had the engineers, and something else. Anyway, I took the gauge group, and GMAD, which was Dave Vaughn at the time, that, all the extra kind of stuffs. Before that, when I was the head of the engineers, reliability engineers, they called themselves at that time, we used to run these meetings, and we ran one for Wolfram.
Is this the reliability board?
Yeah. And he used to come up and he would sit in the front. One day he came into the plant. We were up in 64 on the 3rd floor. Well, when he got by the officer, he'd never show identification.
Yeah.
So then he got in the elevator, pushed the button. Pretty soon the door opened up on 1. Out he walks, Where the hell am I? Somebody else's fault all the time. So anyway, he finally got up to 3 and went in and he sat in the meeting. And I'd been involved in a fiasco that we had on water pumps for that, with the water pumps were burning up. And I found out it was 2 problems instead of 1. And had it kind of charted out to show that. Oh, he thought that was fabulous. Wolfram did. Oh, the only smart guy in the whole room, So after that, if he needed something, why, I tried to get it for him, like he needed a book to write stuff in. I said, hell, I just happen to have one in my hand, that I was taking notes on. So then pretty soon I was the voice. I stood up the podium and just, the hired lip. And let's see, then when Tompkins got to be the director, he said, hey, let's have Friday meetings. So we started those Friday deals where they were just problems, and a lower echelon of people met to discuss these problems.
Okay.
And
with the idea of doing what?
Well, the main thing was the campaigns.
Ooh.
But we used to think they were terrible. But, I get talking to Story and some of those, and hell, that's the best thing that ever happened to them, because it at least gets the customer back to the dealership, see? Okay. He comes in there, and that's the only way they can sell him a car. He certainly can't sell it to him on the outside, because they don't call him anymore like they used to. So...
Just every week you would have those little meetings?
Yeah. And let's see, I was trying to think who the name of some of the people. Service was there, I know. Dale Percival. Then engineering would come over. Don came over to reliability finally from your place over there. No, Don.
Oh, Downey?
Downey. Yeah, he used to come to him and somebody else. And so then one day Tompkins says, now what if you left that job as the head of the engineer? I guess that was the same time then, you know.
Okay.
So he said, who would you recommend for your job? And I said, well, Don Downey. So then they brought Don over. And he said, well, sure, you know. So he came over there and he took over the reliability engineers and that type of
That same
thing.
bunch that you had had.
Yeah. And then,
To do, what was their job?
well, they were, what was it supposed to be? Okay. Engineering designed a part. They were the go-between to make sure that part could be manufactured, how it could be manufactured. You remember how we used to work on the new models? And Ken Knight and so on used to just spend hours and hours and hours out there. Well, that's the type of thing they were supposed to do, each in their own system. In other words, if a guy had moldings for a system, he was supposed to live with moldings until he got them so they fit the car correctly.
Okay.
The heck with it, you know.
Well, how come the guys out on the manufacturing side just didn't do that?
Because they were busy putting them together. But they needed somehow to get back to engineering to tell them, hey, you got to change that design or it's never going to work the way it was designed, you know.
Basically a liaison.
Yeah. That's why so many of them now, as I understand, have gone to engineering because they're almost, well, they kind of like the, you know, the charm of the thing is engineering. It was a real problem, as you probably remember, because the 7th level we started giving cars to, and which ones you give it to, which ones don't you, and then manufacturing wanted to give cars to 7th level. GMAD didn't, so I understand now it's got to be an 8 or Super 8 or some darn thing, whatever that means. So let's see, as the head of that thing, now I got Joe Pohl from engineering to run the GMAD part. Wendell Olds ran the gauge group. Used to take care of all the odd things, like that outside consultant that came in and wanted to sell us on quality and reliability and how it works. They weren't any good anyway. Cook used to ask me, I'd say, no, they aren't worth it.
The outside guy.
Yeah. Because they always want to borrow your watch and tell you what time it is, you know, how they do. Yeah. We used to get along with production, Jack McGinn and all that. It was groups like the methods, layout, that type of thing that we had any arguments with. That's what Don Downey helped, I thought, when he came over, because, you know, he had worked there, so he knew more about it. I think that was our problem, is that we didn't understand them, because the same way with the lab up there. But then when I got working with them on problems, they were great. It was just that I was at fault, not them, you know. Yeah. Right away, you form some idea the first time you see a group, you know. This is way back, but I almost came up there to work once when George found out I was going on inspection. He said, oh, that's terrible. Why don't you come up and run blueprints? Remember the old blueprint machine in the back of 40? Yeah. Yeah. So, and then that's when I used to bowl with those guys, Bob Pastan. Yeah. Bob was what, George's brother-in-law? Yeah, and we were, oh yeah, they were married to twin sisters. I guess Bob's wife is still alive. And we called ourselves Gay Lotharios. Had to make up our own shirts, of course, you know. In Olds League, we didn't give a darn if we bowled well or not.
Okay, go back to now reliability.
Okay, then Elmer,
Guys, you
Yeah.
were 1 of the 3 now.
then Elmer's going to retire pretty soon. See, he
Okay.
kept talking about it. Finally, he decided, gosh darn it, he'd leave. I don't think he trusted the young guys like ourselves to kind of take over, you know.
Oh, really?
So anyway, he left, and Armitage then was director of quality control, we called it, instead of inspection. And Downey then came in to take Charlie's job, and I was in the other office, which was the new one they had built. So that's when the outside the outside consultant had been there, because he was there when Charlie was there, yeah. Oh, let's see.
Who was boss? Tommy still there?
Yes. Yeah. We used to go out to lunch, and we'd come out to, out on Saginaw. The wheel room was around in back. But he had those kind of glasses that would tint down, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he would drive out there in the winter in the snow, and they'd turn dark, and then he couldn't read the menu, and
Right.
he used to have a hell of a time, you know. Yeah. Well, let's see now. Elmer retired, and then I saw Elmer. Oh, I know. Elmer got smoking again, and Elmer had quit smoking for a number of years.
Oh.
But I'm telling you, those meetings would drive you crazy. Then finally, let's see, I'd go to those meetings, and fewer people smoked.
Okay.
So finally, you know, everybody quit.
Yeah.
Except, of course, Ken. He had a pipe, and so did, yeah. Every time you called him on the speakerphone, he'd bang away at his ashtray, not realizing that you could hear it. Yeah, Ken went over to what? I want to say 60, but it's not 70. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when I hired in the whole thing, why, it was over to building 60.
That's where
Employment office. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because there wasn't any 70 at that
Oh,
time,
no.
you know.
Was the medical group there too at that time?
Everything. In fact, I used to, for some reason, I went over to purchasing when they were still there, and they had those, divided offices, but they were divided with glass up above,
Yeah,
you remember? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Bill was head of purchasing. Bill Haight. Yeah.
Uh-huh. He came along after, must have been after Darden or before Darden. Can't remember.
Must have been before, because this was before I knew there was a Tom. Oh, Dart told me. Have you talked to Tom?
No.
Oh, he told me a little bit about his life history. You know, he grew up in Flint, and he married this gal who happened to be the granddaughter of Ari Olds.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and Olds said, "Why don't you come to Lansing, work for Oldsmobile?" So he did. And because they did, why, Olds bought them that house on Morris River Drive. So then we went over to Flint because we were going to school to, GMI or something at that time. And he was showing me his old neighborhood, but at that time it was all run down, all black, Of course, the whole town is now.
Going to pot anyway. That's interesting.
Oh, I know what I want. Then I got involved with the corporation because of the uniform audit. All these auditors work for me in Oldsmobile. Well, then the way I got to know the corporation was through the directors of reliability meeting of all the directors. So I used to go down, I was their secretary. And so then they said, well, we got to sell that uniform audit somehow. How are we going to do it? Well, we made a movie because that had been successful at Oldsmobile. 1 year, we didn't have anything to sell except quality for a new car showing. So John Bell said, well, let's make a movie. So we did. And then he came, let's see, John saw it in Detroit. So did Tompkins. And John was so taken with it, he said, hey, Dale, you're in that movie? And I said, yeah, quite a bit of it. And so the guy, he said, well, then you ought to go to New York and see it. So Tompkins and his wife and my wife, Betty, and my wife and myself went down to New York and saw the movie. And, you know, the lunch and the cars and all that stuff. And then we rode in the elevator afterwards. I never will forget that because somebody said in the elevator, well, hey, you were in that movie, you know. Well, it's, oh, I thought it was a movie star or something.
Right.
In fact, when I went into, up in 70, the top floor.
Yeah, sixth floor.
Yeah, the conference room.
Oh, yeah, 6th level conference
room. Yeah, and the bosses used to have their big meetings up there. Right. And I would go into those meetings because I would report on how the audit was doing, what we had done the last year, or last month, I should say, compared to the last year. But, and how the GMAD plants were doing and all.
What caused the audit to come to pass, Dale?
Well, yeah. Armitage actually started the audit at Oldsmobile.
Okay.
And I started that deal where all we did is pick out the high defects. And we plotted those. And he said, no, let's have a uniform audit. So he got the rest of the corporation together, and they came up with a plan for a uniform audit. In other words, let's count everything. You know. So they were rolling along pretty good, and then they said, well, hey, Dale, why don't you take over the audit? So I took over the auditors, and we loaned 2 people to the corporation, and they went around and, you know, checked the other plants. And so each division then loaned 2 people to the thing. Well, then we said, hey, we not only want to loan them, but we ought to, you know, transfer them right to it. And I'm trying to get this sequence right because Leo from Chevrolet was ahead of it. What the heck was his name? Spansky? No. Spansky was a corporation guy, but he wasn't the head of it. Slotensky was the head of the audit group.
That's the corp audit group.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he worked for me, and Bob Flynn was the head of Spear organization. He worked for me. By this time, see, the directors said, hey, we need somebody to head up all this stuff. So I was kind of appointed, and then pretty soon, you know how that goes, and pretty soon you're the boss of it. And then Mooney used to get mad at me because I would come back to Lansing, and the auditors never gave us a high enough rating. I didn't, or I'm sure they didn't, because I was there.
They were really being tight because
yeah, they said, well, that's where the big boss is from, you know, and hell, he's going to be in the meeting with us. We better be careful. Yeah. And Mooney knew this, Bob, who was, I thought, a great guy, you know, and so then I had what? Uniform audit. But they were all down to the tech center. All this activity.
Down there, and
well,
for you up
yeah, there. But the auditors were out on the road. So if I'd go out like to Southgate plant to see our cars, and they were in Van Nuys or somewhere else that week, they might fly back with me. You know, see, we had a rule that said you had to stay out on the West Coast 2 weeks.
So you would spend all your time.
Yeah, all the money traveling either. Yeah, and so I saw the people quite often, but yeah, they were at the tech center. Their boss was Slutinsky. And then during downtime, they would come into Flint and go kind of have a refreshing school, and I'd go to that and talk to them, you know, that type of thing.
How did you get the guy, as you changed models, what did you have to do with the guys so they knew what to look for?
We would talk to the different divisions. Well, what are you coming out with? GM Truck, for instance, wanted the same uniform audit for trucks. And we said, we can't possibly do it. Bob, who's that short engineer that I heard on the radio the other day? He's over in Europe now. He came from some other division, but he was the assistant chief engineer at Olds, and he was kind of the head of the Omega. And the head of the whole X car project. So Bobby. So he called me and he said, hey, Dale, he said, I want you to tear apart the doors on the Omegas or the X cars. And then this is what you look for. And I said, no way, because we never tore apart. You know, that was one of the rules. Yeah. You just don't take apart anything. You treat it like a customer. Well, from this other thing that I was telling you about that I kind of started was the big defects on a car. In other words, there's 2 or 3 things that a customer would really get excited about out of the audit, because there you had to count everything. A little pimple in the paint, yeah, you know. So that's where Sentinel came from, by the way. Okay. So then we asked about, well, why can't we do this to all of the cars? So they built us a building to do that, and we showed, you know, on a couple of conveyors and so on, well, hell, we can handle all the cars. Well, then Tompkins said, no, we can't. No, we're not going to do all the cars. We'll do a certain percent of the cars, and we'll measure from there, which was the basic argument of the whole thing. But anyway, we finally settled that that's what we would do because he was the boss. Yeah. So we did it that way.
And that was an attempt to put the audit onto a bigger cross-section.
Yeah, except they were supposed to, these people were looking at the whole car just the way the customer did, electrically, and the whole, you know, we had blackout boosts and the whole thing. So, and just the way a customer would see the car when they got it new. In fact, I play golf now with Bill Nugent. And Bill said, you know what I used to do? He said, I used to have enough pull at Oldsmobile to get a car put through that, what do they call that program? You know, that Sentinel is what he was talking about. And they thought it was, you know, you'd see those little stickers on the window and they'd leave them on, and it was ridiculous, really.
Did you ride the car? Or was that just a static?
Yeah, that was a test track out back. Was that little test track, yeah. But then we skipped some of those testing because, you know, we had to park cars outside. Yeah, what the hell? And I used to follow them in warranty, but you could never see the warranty go down with cars. And to this day, I see they're still fighting that battle, but there's so many cars that, for instance, in those days were hard tops, that they said we had to put a new convertible top on, or we had to paint a convertible top, you know. You know that it's all just, well, a good example, I think, was old Dick. He used to be in service. Anyway, he went down to Texas to this big dealer, and his only job is writing up warranty. Okay. But he's smart enough so that he writes it up on older cars, a year old or so, because he knew that we never checked those. In fact, one time we went out to transmission, AA, is it? You know, they've got that funny ad on radio. But that was when we had that sagging transmission. They said, well, don't fix it, for crying out loud. That's how we make all our money. So, yeah, I seen some of the guys the other day.
Correlation between warranty data and what we found in some.
Not at all. None. In fact, I've got reams and reams of information. You know, I'd take 100 serial numbers, the cars we ran through there, and said, all right, what's the warranty, you know? Because if you could prove that you
Oh, yeah.
saved so much money,
Right.
but you never could. Yeah. I don't know how to get at that thing.
Well, that was an attempt to do that. But
Yeah.
apparently it wasn't really.
Well, service would cooperate that far, but they didn't like to. And I've got an idea that they know what's going on too, but they never quite came up. Of course, Oldsmobile had the tightest one of anybody.
Mm.
You know, Buick used to give away the plant. That's why I was quite surprised to hear that Buick is supposedly better than old.
Built the same place too.
Yeah.
Down the same line.
Yeah.
See, Dale, what about, you mentioned Spear back in there.
Oh, yes.
What was Spear?
Spear, we all gave a guy. I had all the plants that furnished Oldsmobile too,
The
parts.
suppliers?
Yeah, all the suppliers. And Spear was an attempt by the corporation to look at the suppliers that were the same suppliers for everybody and really go in and check on, find out,
Quality wise.
yeah, what they were building, what they were making. So Bob Flynn run it, and oh, the guy that just run for governor was
Oh, Englander.
no, the guy that Ingler beat in the primaries.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that guy they used to be at the tech center, as I said too. But we used to hold meetings, and everybody from the corporation would come to the quality meetings. Everybody would come to the Bob Flynn's meetings too.
Okay.
Spear, because we kind of set the rules for the whole corporation, and they all had to agree to them. See?
What did Spear stand for? Do you remember?
Source, prevention, SP, and reliability. What's E for though? Something.
Evaluation.
Evaluation. Yeah. Source, something, evaluation, and reporting. That was it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we set up a computer thing that they could report on. Yeah.
Okay. Did that do what we thought it wanted to do?
Oh, yeah, but at that time, there weren't enough common suppliers. You know, everybody kind of had small suppliers. In fact, the guy I met in Florida, Dick Lax, is the guy that from Michigan here that has the die casting outfits over on the west side. That
Not Dole or Jarvis.
no,
Oh, okay.
he hired. What did I tell you from purchase? Joe Vermetti from purchasing, and a bunch of those people.
Yeah. Okay. What other kinds of things, programs like that, do you remember, Dale, that we developed that were a shot at trying to improve the quality in those days?
Of course, that was our biggest concern, was trying to develop such programs, to the point that at college, I went to Michigan State, as I said, we used to have those people come in kind of as advisors and just look it over, you know, and tell us, hey, if you would do it this way, why, it might be a little bit better. But boy, they were tough nuts to crack.
Why do you think all of that came to pass at that time frame? Were we having significant quality problems, or was it just
I think everybody else was. Olds was kind of looked to as the prima donna, you know, as the best of the bunch, and we were too. Always thought. But you mean why the reliability? And
I'm supporting the reliability, but like the Spear program and the audit thing and all of those were happening kind of together. Something must have been causing that need.
Well, Chevrolet was bad at the time. All that. they kind of instituted taking, starting a bunch of this stuff, like Bob Flynn and Sotinsky worked for Chevrolet.
Yeah.
In fact, what they used to do is call me at 5 o'clock here and say, hey, we got a meeting at 5:30 at the tech center.
Yeah, right.
But it's always closer for us to go down there than for them to come up here. You probably noticed that. But I don't know what the motivation.
We weren't having significant quote quality problems that you were aware of.
No, not here. We used to look up the, I get a kick out of, they do it now evidently, but how the customer perceives the car,
Like when he gets it.
Yeah, and you've seen those books as they go around. That was our only problem, I thought, with the driving of company cars, is that we were driving 3,000 miles to turn them in. So we got the reliability engineers to keep cars, because the problem seems to develop after 3,000 miles.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Was that data used at all, the company car data, like the problems?
Oh, yes. In fact, that's what we would review every Friday, would be, the sheets that were turned in and what was found. Of course, it all depended on how long a guy had a company car, And then we got into the program where we would send them home with employees and with the people up on final and so on. They were real.
$1610 Wellington in Lansing, Michigan. The recording was made on October 15th, 1990 by Jim Walkinshaw at the Oldsmobile History Center at 4000 North Grand River. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes. Did the company car program, Dale, generally provide enough data to make any sense out of all that?
Yeah, but the biggest thing was to get people to turn them in because of income tax purposes.
Oh.
The government kept after us. Well, you supply gas and
Right.
take care of the cars and the whole thing. Well, as you well know, and so we had to make sure that we were doing it for an evaluation purposes, not for the privilege of the people that drove them.
Did other divisions have that same kind of thing with company cars?
Not all of them, no. Let's see. Well, most of General Motors had about the same, but the other companies like Chrysler and so on didn't. They give them a real break on buying a car, but that was all.
How about, Dale, you remember the Darton a little bit?
Oh, Tom was great. I thought it was the most fabulous guy we ever had.
Okay.
Well, because he promoted me. No. No, he used to come by the office when he come back from dinner, and we would sit down and talk. And yeah, I thought he was a great manager, really was, because he could see the big picture, and at the same time, he could think what the individual was going through. For instance, one time he said, hey, we got carburetor trouble. Let's see if we can fix it. So we got the vice president of General Motors in, who also had that division.
Okay.
And he said, hey, you got a great story together. Pile it up and we'll take it out to the carburetor people, and I'll be sure they're there. The reason he had to be sure they were there is because it was our holidays over Christmas,
Oh, yeah.
But we didn't care, as long as we got our story across. But I remember with Tom, we took these great big charts. Remember the big old black bags that stand about 2 or 3 feet high? So, but we would take a company plane.
Mm.
And one time we went out east, And what happened? Oh, I was gonna be sick on the airplane. And I'll never forget that he was very concerned about it, very, thought a lot about, individually, I thought. And then we got out there and come to find out they had reservations for us, but they said, no, we've got 2 to a room. He said, no, General Motors doesn't sleep 2 to a room, so we finally got, set up the way we should be there, but it was only because of him, really.
And then Tommy followed along behind you?
Yeah.
Was that?
Tom came from engineering.
Did that management style change any when that happened?
Yeah, Tom was a test engineer in engineering.
Yeah.
So we leaned more towards the finished product testing than we did, in the guts of the plant.
Yeah.
In other words, away from quality control into the other type of things.
Okay. Did he manage any differently? I mean, from the standpoint of how...
Very little. Yeah, very little management. Yeah, he wasn't, I don't think. Engineering used to tell me he was a great guy, but I don't know. He was all right. But he was awfully concerned about Tom Tompkins' reliability versus the rest of the world, which he shouldn't have been. He should have been willing to work with other people, a little bit more.
Adversarial relationship.
Yeah. And that's with everybody, production right on down. Yeah.
And who followed him?
Dick Fickice came in then.
Right.
And then Dick left and went to Canada, and
did it change any when Dick came from the standpoint of...
Dick was a good administrator, yeah. Yeah, he was more like Dart. Mm-hmm.
Now, were you still there when Dick was there?
Yeah.
That same...
And I left when Dick, yes. I left when Dick was there. And Dick went with Hackworth to Canada.
Now, when you say you left, you retired?
Yes. 35 years I was there, and I started in 47.
So 35 and 47 must have been 82.
Yeah, something like that. It was funny because remember I was off on a sick leave for a year, and they give me a car, and that's why,
Yeah.
But I think it was 82 officially retired. Yeah.
But Dale, in that whole period of time, now you saw a lot of the quality control and reliability and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What do you think were perhaps some of the most significant things that transpired in that 35 years?
What, as far as the product is concerned?
Well, as far as the organization and specifically in the quality aspects of things from how we ran our railroad. We started with an inspection organization.
Yeah. Reliability, which was a lot more,
That's a big change.
I don't know, that's kind of a tough question. Let's see. I started out by inspecting the product, making sure that everything was right, that, went into something, but...
A little different way then. Early on, did the inspectors and the people that ran the plant, were they using any... Seems like we got into a lot of mathematics towards the tail end. And
no, that's reliability, yeah.
That sort of stuff. Did that exist in the early days? Did we use any of that stuff?
No, when I was out on those tourist covers, we used to check a run out and the neck, and put down some figures, and that was it.
Did the figures get used for anything?
Yeah. Not really.
Miles.
And then when reliability come in, you're right. In fact, that was the reason for hiring an outside consultant, was statistical quality control, they called it.
All right. So that was a thing that was kind of a new approach.
Yeah. And that, well, supposedly, you know, if you run a machine and it starts going out of whack, why, then you stop it and then bring it back and that type of thing.
How did the manufacturing bunch see that over that period of time?
They didn't seem to care for it. I think because we didn't care for it, especially because it's just like yellow lights on a street, driving down the street. What do you see when you see a red light and a yellow light? Well, is it a caution, slow down because the light's going to turn red, or is it hurry up and get through before it turns red? You know. So that's what we're looking at now. Is statistical quality control is kind of that way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But the manufacturing guys, they didn't appreciate that, or
Not really.
Something else.
Well, they've got their job to do too. You know, that's what we could never see. Shut down the line. Well, you can't just shut down an assembly line, for crying out loud. Well, how are you going to find out what's wrong? You know, or how are you going to still? Well, that's when Bill Slackey used to be there. That was his theory.
The quality versus quantity issue. How did you see that change over that period of time?
Well, we didn't start up. We used to start up and just, you know, start the assembly line and let them go. And the poor dealers that got those first cars.
Whatever happened.
Yeah, and I always felt sorry for people that said, hey, I don't know, I want to buy the first Oldsmobile of the year because they, you know, it's such radical changes that they were terrible.
Yeah.
And you just shipped them then. Where now you held on to them until, well, at the last. You just held on to them until you got them right. Well, like the Tornado was a good example, I thought. When that got started down the proving ground, geez, we ran every car down there. You used to go down there every Saturday and sit down and listen to what was wrong with them. That's when, who the heck? Oh, Johnny Bells was down there. Yeah.
So the Tornado, was that the first time we had done that approach?
Yeah.
Previously?
For the whole corporation. First time anybody had done it. You don't ship a car until it's right. And it was the first Tornadoes, as you probably remember, that were sold for premiums. They were great cars. But then pretty soon people wanted them so bad, we just shoved them out the door, you know. Yeah.
In the days that preceded that, how?
Well, a good example is, see, the Cutlass line was the same as the Tornado line. With the old, but it was F85, not Cutlass. So they let us then order a car, you know, a new car to buy, the first car. After you drove it your 3,000 miles, you could buy it. So I ordered a green convertible F85.
All right.
The only car that I ever remember saying, no, I don't want it. It was a terrible car because it was early, you know.
Yeah.
So we just built another one. It was a great car.
So whatever came off and went out.
Yeah, through the dealers, and and then they started screaming. Well, no wonder they screamed, and no wonder customers, you know, got a bad image of all cars.
Well, that sort of discussion may have been what precipitated some of this reliability need then.
That could have been.
The fact that we were actually having some of those kinds of problems out there.
At startup, it used to be a terrible mess. You know. That's when Fisher used to send their people over, and who's this great big guy, he used to come over to our task force meetings and write down notes, you know. By gosh, we'll get that fixed. Well, we did. we got everything fixed, but after we built 1,000 cars, we got it fixed, you know.
Time had gone.
Yeah. So then we started the first Sentinel program up in the plant.
Yeah, 150 up there.
No, right over
Oh, you
by
were-
Central Inspection before 150. Yeah,
See if it would work.
yeah, because that's where Dick worked, Strain. Let's see, I had that. I had the Plant 4. That was
Plant
it.
4.
That's it's still, I don't know what they do now, but over there then, we used to analyze these problems that customers would bring in or that would come in with the fleet cars.
The garage.
It's a garage, yeah. And Tom Snyder worked there and Emery Dooling. And they would analyze, you know, what was wrong with the cars. And when they found it out, why then we'd try out a campaign or anything over there to make sure it worked.
Okay.
Because one time we got involved in the steering. Remember, that was after the corporation decided that the car would be divided into systems, but each division would have a certain system. We got involved in the steering. Sure enough, the X car had a problem with the steering.
Prior to that sort of thing, how did they handle the campaigns of the old days that maybe they weren't called campaigns, but
Let's see. Now, we used to have, each one of us was individual, but then you'd find out something from the other divisions.
yeah,
you know.
like you used the same axle and you had a
Yeah. Then you always would go back to the supplier, and the supplier would know. Like we made the forgings for the output shafts, you know. So then we would know that the output shaft was soft or whatever and replace it. In fact, you know, reimburse that particular company, say Pontiac or Buick or whoever it might be, for changing some.
Now, did we find those kinds of things out in the field, or did we find it by our testing?
Out in the field.
Out in the field.
For the most part. And after 3,000 miles, that's what killed us, I think.
See, was the issue of foreign quality anywhere in
No.
there? That had not.
There was no such thing. You know, they were just a bunch of copycats over in Japan.
Okay.
The first time I heard about foreign competition at all was when these outside people were in. They were talking about statistical quality control, and somebody went over to Japan, some older fellow from the United States, and got a job. So, of course, they made a big deal about it.
Yeah.
So, what we did as a corporation then, we sent a couple of auditors. I got to pick them, so one was from Oldsmobile, of course, to Japan. And we audited cars. And they said, hey, Japan really is better than we are.
They did come back with that.
Yeah. So then we said, well, if that's the case, let's try somewhere else. So then Jim Shull went to Australia.
Okay.
He was the other Oldsmobile man, and he took another guy. Another guy went with him. And they went to, Africa and Australia. But Australia purposely to check our cars. You know, Holden was building everything, and then we were sending cars over there. But we were as good as they were because they're quite antiquated plants.
Yeah, I would think that might be true. Yeah.
But Japan, they were real impressed with Japan.
Did they come back waving the flag that we got to watch out, or how?
No.
No. Okay.
But they did say that over in Japan, they were dusting them off with feather things, you know, which they do because they don't have garages. But the biggest thing that, of course, maybe it was me, maybe I was negative about it because, you know, when you guys are so damn super for these things, what's wrong with Japan? Well, what was wrong with Japan was the fact that when an American car got there, they had 7 different things they had to do to it to comply with Japanese. And they stuck, you know, the government stuck all kinds of wage things in our face, you know.
Okay.
Hey, this is going to slow you guys up because, you know, we can sell ours. The one thing that sticks is the outside rear view mirror has to be on the left front fender.
Oh, really?
Or it
about
did
the
at that time,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Which meant, you know,
Oh, yeah.
quite a bit of money involved. Uh, the big thing I always felt was that the government over there agrees with these guys and you know furnishes them money and what do you need and all this type of, where over here it seems to be like almost an adversary type of relationship, you know.
Yeah.
And of course the other thing is just like right now in 1990 when you've got a fuel economy problem, who do you go after? You don't go after the guy that's out there on the street that's doing something bad, but you go after the car manufacturer and say, hey, reduce our, you know, yeah, fix the gas mileage so we don't have to worry about this thing anymore. And gee, you can only do so much, Jim, you know.
Did you fellows in the reliability organization get involved in any of those government
Yeah.
discussions at all?
Yes. In fact, one time I was called down to Detroit to take what do you call those things where you don't have to go to the trial, but you have to go down and make a statement. Disposition, yeah. With our attorneys on that engine debacle with Chevrolet.
Chevrolet engine. Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting subject. It might be worth for somebody in the future. What you suppose precipitated that feeling about those engines?
I don't know. Bob Mooney thought it was the sign that was on Logan Street.
Oh,
This is Oldsmobile, home of the rocket engine.
yeah.
And here we had it in every car in the corporation.
Yeah.
So Bob Cook, you know, had his files full of stuff on that thing. Just, you know, you kept everything.
Oh, sure.
And what do? They come along and subpoena it. So Bob said, to hell with them then. From now on, let's get rid of everything. You know? So we got rid of all that kind of stuff. But they were after us. Well, when did you know and how did you know and what's the difference in the engines and so on.
Yeah.
But I think our advertising is what killed us, according to the attorneys.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were saying that, hey, it's just a corporation engine. It's just like the Plant 5 is building today, you know, Quad 4 or whatever, V6, yeah. I see now what, they're making them corporation engines,
Yeah, they don't talk
or
about
corporation.
You know, suppose it was a holdover from the fact that everybody always bought an Oldsmobile because it had a rocket engine.
Could be. Because I remember the first rocket engine cars I drove. Went over to Charlotte, come back, and this cop followed me, and he said, hey, I'm not going to give you a ticket. I just want to know what the hell's under the hood, you know. Because, boy, that thing would go. Oh, for the time, you know, it was a going son of a gun. That's the same way as the first Starfires. Oh, they used to rumble and make a noise, you know. Now they all do it because the exhausts are bad, but but that's one thing they've worked on for years is that exhaust system, by the way, trying to get it so that it's, you know, the life of the car type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember back, Dale, to what maybe were some of the typical problems of the day, so to speak?
Well, the hood fits used to be a terrible thing. In fact, when we got into plastic hoods, it used to be terrible.
Okay.
Before that was that bumper on the F-85. Remember those yellow jobs we put out? Yeah. They used to be a problem because we tried to coat the bumpers so that you could hit them, you know. They wouldn't hurt them. They looked like they got hit before they ever got out of the car. Yeah, we used to sort those out up in the axle plant. But those hoods, I remember because a lot of guys today think they're just great with the air scoops and all on them, and hell, they were just full of piss. By the way, so was the, what's Chevrolet's famous Corvette? Yeah, made out of plastic or, well, we call it fiberglass, excuse me. But they were terrible cars. Oh, in fact, every time I see one, I think of the same thing.
Yeah.
Especially when I see that ad on the Chevrolet, or like a Silhouette.
Oh, yeah.
They bash the side in, and I think, oh, I hope it comes back out.
How about aluminum hoods, that kind of stuff? Remember we went through a whole bunch of that stuff?
Well, yeah. And we went through aluminum sleeves in the engine too.
For the aluminum engine?
Yeah, because we thought we could take some weight out of it. Well, see, I used to eat downtown with Truxell, all those guys, down to Archie's. Yeah. So then they would tell me about engines, and Truxell had a big thing going about. And I thought it was a good idea, because he would go out to junkyards and see they were throwing away good rods and good crankshafts and so on, even when the engine was done.
Yeah.
So, hell, if we could take any weight or anything out of there, so we went to, the rods were cast instead of forged. Yeah.
Right.
And the crank was cast, yeah. To get some, not only weight out of it, but also money out of it. That's what people don't seem to understand today, is that if you could save a half a penny a car, it was a big thing. And yet they say, well, geez, you could fix that for a couple $2 a car.
Right.
Yeah. That, and I'll never forget the airbag, because we got really involved in that because, being a reliability engineer. Yeah. So Oldsmobile really was the division that tried out all that stuff. And we finally told the government, hey, you guys, if you sell us insurance or sell insurance to the people that buy the cars, then we'll make all the airbags you want to make, because kids are going to slide down underneath them. So today, the only airbags you ever see is right in the steering wheel.
Yeah. And you got to have your seatbelt on.
Yeah. And if you don't, you could slide underneath.
Did that, Dale, the airbag thing, were there any special reliability things that happened when we were doing that program?
Oh, yeah.
Care to share?
Because they were, the timing of the thing is so sensitive. It's got to be just a blink of an eye and it's got to go off.
Yeah.
So we had to also sell it to the public. People just weren't buying them. So we had up in the auditorium, we set up a car and had an airbag in it. So it would come out, not near as fast as the others, but at least you could feel it, It isn't going to hurt you. That was what we were trying to sell them. But to be honest with you, they're too darn costly if they are used. And then we used to sit there and see these pictures of people that actually, guy was drinking, for instance, in a car, and then got in a wreck and killed him. Yeah, with airbag, because he didn't have any seatbelts on, and the glass cut him, and this and that. And there was some case down south, and it was some religion that they had to bury the people right away. And we said, we want that person, brought up, and then we, no. So that dropped the lawsuit right there. But every lawsuit, there was quite a thing. But it was typical, because we used to kid about it, that was a company car option. That the only cars we ever put them on were company cars, because nobody would ever spend the money for that much money for it.
We had a few accidents with company cars with those, didn't we?
Yeah. And, but we were so busy at that time with gasoline right out North Grand River here. There was a station that sold gasoline with water in it. And it used to be terrible. Again, this was the wife's, after 3,000 miles, they would call in, can't start my car this morning, Well, then you take it over to Plant 4 and find out there's ice in the fuel system, because it was water in it, We had some accidents, with airbags in cars. I don't remember anybody really getting hurt, though.
Yeah, I don't remember anybody getting hurt either, but I know a few went off.
We've had some other accidents and
Yeah.
wouldn't have helped us, like that taking off the top of the car, going underneath.
Truck.
Yeah, a truck. That doesn't.
And then, were you involved in the diesel business at all when that started out?
When it got started, because we said, look, we got the heaviest, best engine in the industry. So all we got to do is turn it into a diesel engine. We should have designed a diesel engine from the start. But they said, no, we can do it with a 455 cubic inch, So we said, all right. So they came up with a design that would work. And so they started building the diesel engines. And then they got on the supplier because it has to be the distribution system that's bad. But the distribution system is so darn expensive on the thing because, it's a different tube to every cylinder. And, yeah. So they used to call them in and tell the people, well, we will replace your parts. And then they finally said, hey, we'll just, put you on a regular car, put a regular engine in for you. Oh, no, they wanted the diesel engine. Yeah. Of course, the diesel, I think, really lost its appeal when the price of diesel fuel is up almost as high as gasoline. So, and the truck drivers all know that too, because yeah, I don't blame them. I think the reason we don't blame them is because down the road we're going to have to pay for transporting everything.
Dale, who's the best boss you ever had?
Darton, no question about it. He was the very best, I thought. Helmer Cole was a good boss, a very strict man, but Helmer is still involved, with a church out in East Lansing.
Helmer said, yeah.
Yeah, Elmer was very good. In fact, at one time, I was Elmer's assistant in quality control. And I went out to the plant and got in a fight with Ed Gerke. Yeah, I wound up, as the assistant director of quality control, whatever the heck that might have been. But that's where Elmer was a good boss, but he had to be directly involved with everything. Of course, that's when I got to know Tom Police real well, because we used to be able to go over to his office, sit down and shoot the bull with him, That's when he was inspection on the final line. Else.
What have we left out? Anything that you can think of off the top of your head? How about general manager? We get very close to them?
Yeah. John Bells especially. Because John and Lowenstein both graduated the same year I did from high school. How about that? And Lowenstein, by the way, is still active. She married that fellow. And I thought he was fantastic. In fact, if he had stayed around, if he hadn't have died, he'd be, he was much better, I thought, than Bob Stempel, who's now the head of General Motors. I think one of the weakest guys we ever ran into was who used to be assistant, not comptroller, but assistant to down Detroit, Howard Carroll. Yeah, because Howard, came from Chevrolet here, and then he came over. He was going to be inspection, then he wasn't. Then he went over to engineering. So when he got the job in Detroit, we met him that night, and he gave a speech, but he gave it on the uniform audit because we had slides for it.
Oh, yeah.
Down at Dearborn, And, he was complaining then. and I don't blame him, because you see, when you leave 60 now, or 70, fabulous offices up on the top floor belong to the general manager. So they took him down to Detroit, put him way in the back, and he had a secretary working for him. Over here, he had 3,000 or 4,000 people, that he could, tell what to do. So I thought, oh, come on now, that's kind of sour grapes, until who's that guy that took his place, that left the corporation? But he said the same thing. What the hell is it? He was down in Lansing one time too. Yeah, the staff meetings with the general managers, we used to go to them because, as I told you, report on quality and so forth. So that's where I got to know a lot of those people. Of course, we worked very closely with service, with sales, because of the aspects of reliability.
Yeah.
So we got to know, and purchasing. In fact, I still see a lot of the guys from sales, service. We'd be involved, for instance, we were talking in the staff meeting about a new store they were opening up in New York City.
Okay.
And the next week you'd be out to New Jersey, so you'd go over to New York and take a look at this place,
Okay.
And it turned out that it was run by the fellow that later became the head of the service department. And it was a mistake right from the start, because it never would make out. See, what was happening was that people, when they took their car into New York, they would say, hey, there's something wrong with it. I got to take it to the dealer.
Mhm.
Well, the reason they wanted to take it to the dealer is because it cost so much to take it to a garage to park it, So he was just loaded, so he said, oh, the heck with it. So all the independents got out of the business, and we decided, well, we ought to have a store there. Wolfram decided, I should say, and then we had a store. So I play golf now with old Sarvis, the Sarvis Industries. And yeah, he was telling me the other day, we were playing, he said, I have all kinds of dreams, but I still dream about Oldsmobile. Yeah, he made out pretty good, but he figures at the end he got shafted by Wolfram, because Wolfram told him that, well, don't worry about our Plant 4 warehouse. We're going to still rent space from you for a warehouse.
Yeah, this little place.
And they didn't. Yeah. So, but what he didn't understand is that one man doesn't make the decisions. Maybe he did as the owner of Sarvis Industries, but even Wolfram didn't make all the decisions, Yeah. So that was, I was going to talk about John Bells. One time he come up to us and he said, hey, guys, we ought to go out to the GMAD plants and give them hell about warranty, because they're higher.
Oh.
So I wrote up a warranty thing for each plant.
Yeah.
They were all the same except, the plant numbers. Yeah. So he said, well, what I'll do, I'll get Lowenstein, his wife, and Dale, you get Betty, and Tommy, you get Mildred, his wife, and we'll all fly out. So we went out to Boston. And I'll be a son of a, well, we had been out a couple weeks before that in the company big plane.
Yeah.
But he got one of the jets for that. So he said, hey, we might as well take advantage of it. So we went out to Boston and we put on our presentation while the guys took the women out around Boston Harbor, in the boat.
Yeah.
Then we went out over the Atlantic with this plane. And then the next time we saw anything was the Pacific Ocean. We landed in San Francisco. Yeah. And the pilot, the other guys, there were 3 of them on board, and they all stayed with us. So they stayed in some hotel, and we stayed in the very best places. Oh, it was real fabulous. So John said, where should we go to eat? So I said, well, this one place is good over by Oakland. So we went over there, but the reason it was good is because you pick out your steak when you go in. And then they serve you a bottle of wine with the dinner. He said, we're not going to drink that cheap wine. He says, hell, we're from General Motors, so we it was like $100 a bottle. So he says, well, take care of the bill, Dale. You know? Yeah. So then we went back. What the heck is the name of that hotel? Right in the heart of San Francisco, and it's a famous one. Went downstairs, and the raft comes in, you know.
Yeah.
So he got drinking Navy grog. Oh, a couple of those, 3, 4, 5, you know, went on and on. So the next day we were going to go down because it was a holiday then, Saturday, yeah. Friday we had been over to the plant, Fremont. So Saturday we were going to go down the coast to this particular outfit. Oh, some kind of craft show at Monterey.
Okay.
And by gosh, we were late.
Oh.
So we said, well, John's not up yet anyway, John and Lowenstein. So we drove down there and back, and he said, I decided not to go. And I said, I don't blame you after all that grog you drank last night, because he was, yeah. And Jack Armour was our guy out there in the plant. And Jack was quite a fisherman. So, and he'd been out and caught a bunch of salmon. And John said, well, that's great, but what my wife really wants is some of those French breads. So, by gosh, just when we were going to get on the plane, which of course was just waiting for us, you know, because it was our personal plane, here Jack drives up and he's got what I always kidded him was loaves and fishes, you know, because he had all this French bread. And then we got back to Lansing so fast that John's chauffeur wasn't off the airport yet.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
He got upset about that. I said, hey, there's my car right there. Take that and go on home. No, he wouldn't do that. So, but they finally got home all right. That was a lot of fun. So we went on, I don't know, 3 or 4 different trips with him and Lowenstein.
Any other general managers you had to wander around with?
Yeah. Who took John's place? Metzel. The thing I remember about Metzel is going out to LA with him. Yeah. In the first place, on the airplane, he wouldn't even sit with us. He just sat by himself and read a book. And we sat in the back of the plane with Tompkins or something. Somebody was there. And when we got out, Dave Maughan and Tompkins were both there. Then we got out to LA, got in a car, and the driver didn't know where Southgate was. He said, well, Dale, you've been out here. You tell us how to get to Southgate. So I had to kind of keep my eye on the road, even though I was in the back seat. So what's Metzel do? He sits in the front seat and smokes a big cigar with all that. Well, yeah, but out there they got smog anyway. That's all we needed was that. And I couldn't hardly see, you know. I said, turn here. And we finally found it. No problem. Yeah. Hugh Stanley used to live out there, you know. He used to have that Southgate and plant. Yeah, I thought about him the other day because they talked about Downey in the paper. Let's see. Oh, Metzel, the next morning, yeah, Dave Maughan was with us because the next morning, Metzel says, hey, I brought my razor, but I forgot my plug, you know, his extension thing with it. And he said, so I'm going to have to stop in the barber shop and get a shave. Dave Maughan wanted to loan him a razor. He said, no, he said, I don't want to borrow it. So it turned out, I said, what kind do you have? And well, it turned out that I could loan him my cord and it fit his razor. Yeah. Well, it was the same make, evidently. So he shaved all right.
Problems of travel.
Yeah. Then we'd take him out to the plant. Of course, we knew everybody. You know what the trick they used to use, though, is they'd have an index card, and I'd put all the names down and the positions of the people. Okay. Well, then when they walk in, like John Bell, real smart. Hell, you knew everybody. Oh. Well, he could because he had the card with him. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame them, because hell, they've never seen him before, but it's yeah. Last time we had when who used to be the head of Olds, it was the president of General Motors. Knudsen, or not, Estes, I mean. Saw him one day, and he was gonna buy down towards Charlotte, south, because that's where he was from. And I said, well, that's where that's where that baseball player was from at the time. Oh yeah, yeah, that area down in there. He was a nice guy. Cole, I never thought that much of.
Really?
Yeah, because he had big ideas, but they weren't anything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got to tell you about one of the board meetings we had. This fella said, hey, Dale, can I come to a reliability board meeting? I said, yeah, as long as you don't sit in the front row because of the general manager. We save seats for them in the middle. Yeah. Okay, so he came in, but he sat, third or fourth row back. And then the meeting started, and by gosh, if he didn't start having a cough fit. So he had to get up and excuse himself and leave the room, and the general manager says, well, I forget who it was then, Bob Cook maybe, but anyway, he said, well, who was that? Well, it was Bob Stemple, but he's a new engineer they just hired over to engineering. Yeah.
Oh, no, next time you see him.
That's well, I saw, who were we just talking about? The one, Hackworth. Yeah. Saw him down in Florida. He's got a place down there. Had lunch with him. He wanted to retire and his wife didn't want him to. By the way, if anybody that you know of, Jim, wants to retire, tell him, well, you know as well as I do, you can't beat it.
Oh, I don't.
I don't.
I must not have anything to do with it. He doesn't want to retire. Absolutely nothing.
Well, that's surely decess. So, skilled trades, but Shirley finally retired. He didn't want to. And hell, it was costing him money not to.
Well, you're working for $1 an hour or something.
But I think that he was,
Yeah.
and he was kind of scared of retiring because.
Well, you think we've rounded in the ground? Dave?
Yeah. I can't think of anything else.
Good job. Well,
All
we'll just shut our baby off here.
right.